Thanks for tuning in. You will hear my introduction in a few minutes, but first, I just wanted to jump into this recording with a few questions to set the context for the work-life balance workshop that you're about to watch. I know you value work-life balance since you're here, and that probably means that you value different aspects of life. So do you have any kids? Whether they're young or adults, they are probably an important part of your life. What about aging parents? Are they at a stage where they need or rely on you for help and support? Do you have any pets, dogs, cats, maybe guinea pigs? Do you like or wish you had time for exercise? Or maybe you would prefer to sit in a cafe with your favorite book? What about resting? Do you wish you had time for a nap every day or sitting on a couch watching TV? Maybe you prefer to meditate over watching TV? And what about cooking? Do you like to cook or do you spend the least time possible in the kitchen? Obviously, we all have lots of things that we're interested in doing. There are lots of things that we want to make time for, and that's often the challenge. I'm also going to assume that if you're here, you're someone who cares about your work. You don't just go to work to get a paycheck. You also enjoy work. And probably the more you care about your work, the more you tend to dedicate time to it. So that's some of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to start by saying that the reason why I think this topic is so important is because work-life balance is extremely tied to well-being and also tied to performance. Enjoy the workshop, and I'll see you again at the end. I'm currently working with an executive client who I'm coaching, and I'll keep his name private, but let's just call him Sam for the sake of it. Sam works in a company that is growing very quickly, and they really value Sam. They know that he brings a lot of experience. He's very committed to the work he does, so committed that he often works after hours. And they know he has a lot of knowledge. So they absolutely don't want to lose Sam. And so they brought me in to do some coaching with Sam because they want him to move up from a manager position into a director level position and eventually into a VP level position. But they also know that Sam takes care of his mom, who has dementia. And they also know that Sam is about to get married and likely have a kid. Well, he told me that he's planning to have a kid and is excited to become a parent. And unfortunately, we also know that he's at high risk of having a stroke. And yet he is so committed to his work that he's often sending emails at 2 a.m. And his bosses know that this is a problem because his bosses know that this is going to eventually affect his performance. So that's why they've brought me in to do some coaching with him. Then we have another example of someone who is a manager in a financial institution. This person leads a team of 150 people, and his boss just had a stroke. And so now he has the workload that his boss was taking on in the past, and at the same time as managing 150 people. Now, the difference between the first person and the second person is that the first person works in an environment that really values well-being and wants to support people in creating healthy strategies for their own wellness. The second example, the workplace is a little less invested in people's well-being, but this particular person has taken it on his own to take care of his own health and wellness and to have really strong work-life balance. And I'll talk more about his particular strategies. Then we have a third example. And the third one is a woman also in a leadership position. And she has been getting close to burnout herself. She's been thinking of going on a leave. However, it turns out that her boss just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. So this is not the time for her to go on leave because she doesn't want to leave her team without anybody supporting them. Members of her own team are burning out, and some of them have left for other better positions. And so she's dealing with the weight coming from the top, from her boss having gone on a leave, which of course her boss absolutely has to go on a leave, and also the weight of losing team members and a sense of responsibility towards her team members. She doesn't want to go on leave herself because there's too much going on right now. What happened in her case is she actually completely quit her job. She reached a point where she just couldn't take it anymore. She didn't just go on a leave, she quit her job. This was 2 years ago, and she's just now finally beginning to explore re-entering the workplace. So these examples to me are actually reminders of the work I used to do more than 20 years ago when I used to work in the VAW sector. And for those of you who don't know, that stands for the Violence Against Women sector. I used to work as an advocate for women, primarily women, leaving situations of violence, situations of abuse, mostly domestic violence and abuse. And it's very interesting to me, the parallels between abusive relationships and abusive work situations. So I think when we talk about work-life balance, we have to talk both about the strategies that we adopt as individuals and the environment that we're creating in our workplaces. So we're going to talk about both of those in the workshop today. But first, let me do a proper introduction of myself. If you don't know me yet, I'm Ginny Santos. I'm the CEO at Niole. We're a small training, consulting, and facilitation company. And as a CEO, it's very important to me to enable my own team members. We have a small team working across 4 different time zones. And it's very important to me that my own team members be able to have work-life balance. I also think of myself as a well-being advocate because when I'm working with clients, I'm helping them create strategies for their own work-life balance, or I'm going into workplaces and working with entire teams to help have conversations about work-life balance and create agreements so that people can improve their work-life balance and their well-being. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Wilfrid Laurier University. And what's interesting about that is that when I teach, I'm teaching creative thinking skills. I'm teaching creative problem solving, which is also something I do with clients. But I don't see it as just being creativity and innovation for product development or for marketing purposes. I actually see creative thinking as a life skill. It's a life skill that enables people to be resourceful when things are challenging. It's a life skill that enables people to create change. And so as a life skill, it is something that I've discovered is very, very useful for creating work-life balance. What's interesting when I teach and when I train in creative thinking is that I often ask participants, let's choose a topic that we can all work on, that we can all do some creative problem solving around, but that you all care about. And year after year, I noticed that the topic that kept coming up, and I'm talking about teaching undergrads, I'm talking about teaching executive MBA students and training executives on their teams inside their organizations. And again, the topic that kept coming up as one that was important to people was the topic of work-life balance. And I realized that people felt stuck. They were like, yeah, I want work-life balance, but it doesn't seem like something real. It doesn't seem like something achievable. And so we would use that topic as our case study for learning creative thinking skills. And again, I would discover that the reasons people are getting stuck are often very similar. So that's going to come out in today's workshop as well. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to discover the different types of work-life balance so that you can identify which one is the right type for you. Because when you know the type that's right for you, you know what strategies to take. We're also going to reflect on the real problem behind the need for work-life balance. Why is it that it's difficult to achieve? And what is it that you actually need to resolve in order to achieve work-life balance? So why is it getting harder and harder to achieve work-life balance? And I want to say that work-life balance actually has gotten harder, not easier, in the last couple of decades. Work-life balance was a very hard-won right that people fought for really hard during the Industrial Revolution. Work-life balance is not a new concept. It's been around for a long time. Some of the biggest wins happened in 1940 when people won for the first time legislation around the 40-hour work week. And then in the 1980s, the term work-life balance became very popular because more and more women were becoming part of the workforce and were demanding things like maternity leave so that they could have some more work-life balance. So work-life balance has been something that people, our ancestors, have fought for a really long time. And we need to actually keep up the fight to an extent because we are losing. The importance of work-life balance is something that is being lost. I don't know about you, but if I think back to my first job, when I had my first job, we didn't have smartphones, but we didn't even have cell phones. We didn't even have internet at home. So when I went to my first job, I'd go into the office and I could only work when I was at the office. Once I left the office, sure, I could take things in my head and I might be worried about some things, but I couldn't actually be taking notifications, responding to messages, or working on a document or any of that. Now it's almost become an expectation that you're available all the time. Not only that, but also we still have lots of women in professional careers with a real interest in developing their career, but still managing the expectation that they're doing the bulk of the house care, the taking care of aging parents and children, and house chores and cooking and all those other things. So work-life balance hasn't become something that the spoiled brat is demanding. It's a right. It's not a luxury. It's a need. So let me ask you all in chat, what do you think is making work-life balance harder to achieve? So one thing that definitely helps is understanding what work-life balance really is and what you actually need in order to achieve it. So what I'm going to say is that work-life balance is not really about bringing into balance two opposing things. Work and life shouldn't be in opposition. Work is a part of life. The challenge is that work can be a really big part of life, and that's when it becomes in conflict with life. So if I use some really good colleagues of mine, Sam and Mark Hurwitz, who are leadership and collaboration experts, they use a metaphor that's the shopping cart metaphor. So imagine when you're going into a grocery store and you pick a shopping cart, and it turns out you grab a shopping cart that has a wonky wheel. Yeah, one of the wheels isn't quite working right. It's okay. You can push the shopping cart when it only has a few things in it. But the more things you pile into the shopping cart, the harder it becomes to push. So life is like that shopping cart. The more you put into it, if the wheels are working really smoothly, you can put a lot of things into that shopping cart and you can still push through. But if the wheel is wonky, that's going to make the pushing of the shopping cart very challenging. So there's two things you could do. You could empty the shopping cart so that you can push it more easily, but that's not necessarily what we want to do. So we often hear, well, you should be doing less, or you should put more boundaries in place. Yes, that's helpful and that's important. But if the wheel is wonky, you're not addressing the real problem. So let me explain what I mean by that. When talking about work-life balance, it helps to understand what's the opposite of work-life balance. And the opposite of work-life balance is work-life conflict. Work-life conflict is where work demands negatively impact parts of life or vice versa. But it's more common that the work demands are negatively impacting your life. So for example, there was a woman in one of our workshops recently who talked about how she loves her work. She has found a job exactly in the career that she wants to be in. She's really proud of it, very dedicated to it, but it's exhausting. And so by the end of the day, she's just completely drained, and all she does is rest and recover in order to be able to go back to work the next day. That's a life that's in conflict. That's a work-life situation. That is work-life conflict. So that's not what we want. Now, if work and life are in conflict, then yes, it helps to set limitations. It helps to manage expectations. It helps to set boundaries. It helps to use vacation time and sick days. It helps to learn to say no, which is definitely a skill we all need to develop. It helps to communicate your limits and to communicate the need for resources. So perhaps this person had just way too many demands on her at work, and she really wanted to do a good job. And so she was going above and beyond her own limitations. So it's possible that she needs to set some limits and that she needs to communicate that perhaps there's a need for more staff. But there's also another side to the coin here, and that is that what we really need to put into balance is not always work and life, but time and energy. So here you see I've got a bunch of little glasses and I got a bowl of marbles. So the bowl of marbles represents time. We all have the exact same amount of time. We have 24 hours, and here are 24 marbles. Now, we all have different parts of life. So these cups here represent all the different parts of life. And I'm going to use myself as an example. So for example, let's say I spend about 8 hours a day. I'm going to get 4 or 5 marbles here plus 3. That's 8 hours working. Let's say that I spend, let's put 3, I'll start 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 hours resting or sleeping. And I've put 9 hours in there because I truthfully need 9 hours to mellow down, to decompress in order to go into a good sleep and get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. So those 9 hours might include reading in bed, might include doing a meditation, might include just like turning down lights and relaxing. Then let's say that I am going to spend at least an hour having dinner with my family and my kids. That's a very important time of day for me, is when I connect with my partner and my kids. I have a blended family with 4 kids. Sometimes all 4 kids are home. Sometimes only 2 of them are home. But that dinner time is extremely important. In that same cup, there's other family time responsibilities. So like, for example, making breakfast and lunches for kids, getting them out to school goes in there. Taking my youngest son to soccer practice can go in there as well, although the soccer practice could count as social time. Let's say that, sometimes I like to hang out with friends and not just with kids. So I do have some social time there. Let's say I'm going to also put a marble here for taking my dog on a half-hour walk in the morning and a half-hour walk in the evening. And I'm going to put a marble here for that phone call I'm expecting today from my dad, who is going through a really hard time because he's caregiving for my stepmother, who has Parkinson's. And I have to say, my dad is just not made out to be a caregiver. And it's it's a very stressful situation. And I've become his emotional support person, I guess you could say, which is very, very hard on me as well. And I have one more marble here that I will put into exercising. So I'm going to put that along with the dog walks, because the dog walk is a form of exercise as well for me. Okay, so we all divide up our marbles in different ways, and that's all good. There's no judgment here. We all have different patterns, different lifestyles, but there's another very important ingredient here, and that is energy. And so you see I have these like little jars here, and there are 4 different colors for a very important reason. And that is that we have 4 different types of energy. So for example, blue energy stands for social energy. So depending on the work you do, Your work might take some of your social energy. There might be a lot of like interacting that needs to happen at work. Going to the park with my dog takes some social energy, lots of small talk. Going to soccer practice might take some social energy. And then we have another type of energy, and this one stands for intellectual energy. So again, depending on the work you do, it might take up some of your intellectual energy. Intellectual means like working through challenges, figuring out solutions, doing thinking, doing problem solving. That's all intellectual energy. Learning is all part of your intellectual energy. There's other areas of my life that would definitely use up intellectual energy, but I just want to introduce you to the four right now. Another one is emotional energy. And think about how much your work might use up emotional energy. If you're in a toxic workplace, if there is a conflict going on with a colleague, that's going to definitely use up some of that emotional energy. If there's a conflict going on in your family, I'm going to put a lot of emotional energy into the conversation with my dad. That takes up a lot of emotional energy. So different parts of life take up emotional energy for sure. And here we have physical energy. So again, work, especially if you're seated for a very long time and maybe you don't have access to very healthy foods, it actually takes up a lot of physical energy. If you have something to do after work that is draining physically, that's going to take up physical energy as well. But what's interesting about energy, as opposed to time, is that time is fixed, it's solid. They are marbles. You can't get more marbles, and you can't meld or change those marbles. But energy is fluid. And depending on the work you do and depending on the environment you work in, work can actually replenish your energy. So I have an empty jar here for getting back overall energy. So I'm going to take some energy from work. If you do work that is intellectually stimulating, you enjoy your work, that's going to give you energy. And it's going to give you energy for later in life, for other parts of the day. If you have positive social interactions at work, that's going to give you back some energy for later for other activities in your day. That is part of your social energy. So you're going to get back some of that energy. If you're getting a good rest, good sleep, that's going to replenish all four types of energy. So you're going to start off the day tomorrow with more energy. And you can start to see where we're going with this. The more energy you have, the more you can actually do in a day, regardless of the amount of time that you have. You're more efficient, you're more focused, and you enjoy the different parts of life more. So the key point here is that we need to understand that work-life balance is not just about bringing work and life into balance in the sense of how we spread out our time, but how we give and take energy from different parts of life. Often the solution to getting more work-life balance that people talk about is this whole idea of setting boundaries, of learning to say no, of learning to do less with your day. And these are really important skills. I'm not saying that they're not. But if the real problem is a lack of energy, then doing those things is only going to get you so far. If the real problem is a lack of energy, the truth is that you need to put in place some boundaries. You need to do less until you can get your energy up. And getting your energy up requires some individual strategies, but also being in a workplace, doing a type of work that feeds your energy, as opposed to draining you completely. And that's part of what I'm talking about when I talk about there are people that unfortunately are in abusive work situations, just like there are people that are in abusive relationships. It's really hard to get out of an abusive relationship. And there's really good reasons why people choose to remain in an abusive relationship. There are very good reasons. And so there's lots we can learn from that world and apply it into the world of careers and the world of work-life balance. So let me pause here. Let's see. Up until now, what has been most interesting or insightful to you? So the key point there, before I move into the next section, is exactly that we really need to talk less about bringing work and life into balance and talk more about bringing time and energy into balance and learn how to increase our own energy and learn how to choose things in your day that give you energy. There are always going to be some things that suck the energy out of you that you can't avoid. You can't, for example, I'm not going to say no to having a conversation with my father, even though it's difficult. There are things in life that are difficult and we have to do them, and they're going to drain the energy out of us. But the more we've been able to replenish our energy throughout the day, the more we're able to do those things, which is part of the richness of life, is to be able to do things, a balance of things, things that are difficult and things that we truly enjoy. Now, the next piece that we need to understand is the type of work-life balance. So they say, there's this quote by Ingrid Bergman that says, success is getting what you want, happiness is wanting what you get. The trick here is deciding what you truly want so that you can be strategic in how you get to it. So for this reason, it's really helpful to understand the different types of work-life balance that exist and to be able to identify which one do you want so that you can get it. Because what happens to a lot of us is that we fall into a situation by default without really planning for it, without really thinking about what we want. But when we can be clear about what we want, that's when we can move towards it. So let me show you the 4 different types, and let me explain that which type of work-life balance you want really depends on the stage of life you're in. If you're early in your career versus if you're later in your career, if you are really interested in moving up the career ladder into leadership positions, or you're very satisfied with staying in a different type of position, whether you really want to dedicate more time to life and raising children or being a caregiver for aging parents versus whether you really want to dedicate time to growing in your career. So depending on what you value most and depending on what stage of life you're in, you might choose one type of work-life balance versus another. So here we have on the one axis here, we can go from complete separation between work and life or complete integration between work and life. And on the other axis, we have work-centric type of work-life balance where we are more focused on our careers, and life-centric where you're more focused on life. So let me again use a metaphor, and this time I'm going to use the metaphor of a garden. So imagine that life is a garden. If you want complete separation between work and life, you will build a greenhouse in your garden and you will go into the greenhouse and close the door, and that's where you'll do your work. If you want complete integration, you might put a desk in the middle of your garden and you might work in the garden while you're looking at the garden. So that's the difference between complete separation and complete integration. Now, let's talk about the next difference from work-centric to life-centric. So if you are work-centric, and a good example of that would be people who are more in leadership or who really care about their careers tend to be more work-centric. People who really want to move up to a certain position or who are really dedicated to the type of work that they do, they are more work-centric. And so you can be work-centric with clear boundaries, which means you want complete separation between work and life, or you can be life-centric with clear boundaries, which means that you want to dedicate more energy to your life than to your work, but you also want to have clear boundaries. So in that case, you might have this garden of life, and work happens in the greenhouse still, because you have clear boundaries, but the greenhouse is kind of off to the side. It's a small part of your garden. It's not the centerpiece in the garden. And in the next example, we have work-centric with life blending in. So this one would be with complete integration between work and life. So this might be someone who is an entrepreneur who, they're like dedicating their full life to a passion project, and they're building a business around it. That would be someone who is work-centric with life blending in. Everything is part of work almost. And on the other hand, we have life-centric with work blending in. So an example of this is actually, so someone I know, for example, who works in a leadership position, in a high-up leadership position, managing a large team. But this person really only works 4 hours a day, works from home, is very committed to his lifestyle. He puts a lot of effort into his social life, and he has a very relaxed lifestyle. So he's very life-centric. Work is a way of making money. He doesn't really care so much about moving further up in the organization. He's quite satisfied where he is. And he doesn't feel like he needs to impress anybody because he's already gotten to a certain level of position. So work is blending in with life for him. Now, let me say for myself, as an example, if I was on this axis, I would say that at this stage in my life where my kids are, the youngest one is about to become a 13-year-old this weekend. So they're all teenagers. So I would say that at this stage in my life, I am more work-centric than life-centric. So I'm going to place myself here for the work-centric versus life-centric. And in terms of separation and integration, I do work from home. I've worked from home for the last 12 years or more, but I actually do have separation. I've created an office in my home, and on the weekends, I don't even step into my office. In the evenings, I don't even step into my office. When I leave work, I leave work. I do occasionally read things because I'm passionate about the work I do. So I read things in the evening or on the weekends that relate to work. But my team knows that unless there's something quite urgent going on, I don't usually send emails or reply to notifications on the weekends. So I'm going to say that I do like some separation. I'm going to put myself here for separation because I am also closer to integration than to complete separation. So this would be where I place myself. So where on the complete separation to complete integration, the specific question is, what is your best hope for your work-life balance? So not so much where are you now, but where do you want to be? What type of work-life balance do you want to have? Do you want to have complete separation, or do you want to be further up on the separation? Do you want to be closer to complete integration? Do you want to be more life-centric or more work-centric? What is your goal? Where would you like to be? Because we assume that people want more work-life balance separation. We assume that people want to be work-centric, and it really depends on how focused you are on your career versus your life. It really depends on your age. It depends on where you're at in life. And this is the richness of this. And these are the types of conversations that we need to be having in the workplace. Because truth is, people perform best when they have the type of work-life balance that works for them and works for where they're at in their life. Diversity is good. Diversity is what makes us human. And diversity is what makes life exciting and makes life different at different stages of life. So again, it's just so important to acknowledge that this difference exists and that there's no judgment. There's no one type of work-life balance that is better or worse. It all depends on what is better for that particular person. I want to say that the important piece here is that there's real power in choosing the type of work-life balance that you want, so that then you can come up with the right strategies to achieve that type of work-life balance. And so that you can communicate it to the people you work with so that they understand what your goal is and they can support you and you can support them. When we make a choice, we become able to choose the right strategies. So how do you do that? You know what? Before I go into that piece, I want to say I started off talking about creative thinking and the power of creative thinking. We all have the ability to do creative thinking. And because we all have that ability, we're all able to problem solve. We're all able to come up with strategies that work for us. But there is a saying that I really like, which is, when you don't know how, ask who. When you don't know how, ask who can support you. Who can you have a conversation with? Who might know some answers? Who might help you come up with some ideas? And so I actually want to make myself available to be that who. If you need to have a conversation about this that becomes more personal, you can always schedule a 30-minute Zoom conversation with me. I've been over the last, I'd say over the last 6 months, I've been interviewing people and talking about workplace wellness and about personal strategies. And every conversation I have helps me be better and better at the work I do. So the conversation is not just useful to you, it is also useful to me for sure. The other thing I want to say before I keep going is that if you want to, I talked about these different types of energies, the 4 different types of energies. That could be a whole other workshop. But if you want to learn more about them, we're about to publish an ebook that explains the 4 different types of energy, 4 different types of well-being, and how to work with your team to create a better workplace culture. So if you want to make sure you get that ebook, it is going to be free. Make sure you're signed up for our newsletter. Okay, now let me say that there is a saying, which is that practice makes perfect. And I'm going to have to tell you that that's not true. Practice makes habits, and habits can be good or bad. So what we need to do is we need to develop habits that actually support us in what we want to achieve. And there are 2 types of habits. There are habits that you can create as an individual. We call those individual habits. Some of them are unconscious. You've developed them during childhood. You've developed them from watching other humans do things a certain way, and you've picked up habits from other people. Sometimes you've picked up good habits, and sometimes you've picked up bad habits. Depending on your workplace culture, there might be more tendency for individuals to have positive habits or not so positive habits. But then there are the group habits, the ones that happen in your workplace, as an example. And those are either written, and so they could be policies, they could be protocols, agreements, and memos, or they are unwritten. There are things that just kind of have fallen into place, that have just come to be in a workplace, and those habits make up the workplace culture. So we want to become conscious about developing habits that are positive and that support everybody in having a better work-life balance and stronger health and wellness so that their energy can increase. So the next big question becomes, how do you get from your current reality to the type of work-life balance that you actually desire? And the answer is right here. Create those positive individual habits and work inside your workplace culture to create more positive workplace habits. So let me check in, and I want to ask, what are habits that you already have Or what are workplace culture? What are habits that are already in your workplace that already support you? Morning rituals. And that reminds me of another client of ours who is also in a high leadership position. And something I learned from her is that she, even though she's in this very demanding leadership role, she has this routine in the mornings before she starts work, where she first walks her dog for a full hour. And then she volunteers as a crossroad guard. You know, the people that stand at the traffic lights to help children cross safely and get to school safely. She does that for an hour every single day, which helps her connect to her neighbors. She just like has this like really simple, small conversation, small talk with the neighbors that have become all really known to her. And then she starts her workday feeling really energized. And then she fully focuses on her work. Hi again. I really hope you found this workshop useful. But before you leave, let me add one more thing. As you might already know, I'm on a mission to elevate every person's ability to contribute their best selves at work, at home, and in their communities. I do this by providing wellness coaching to individuals who have a lot on their plate but don't have the energy they need to keep up with everything. I also work with organizations that value their people and want a healthier workplace culture. Unfortunately, the default nowadays is to overwork. The default is to prioritize other people's demands over your own needs. The default is to take care of other people before you take care of yourself. Even though we've heard over and over again, put your own oxygen mask on first before you assist someone else. We know that that makes sense, and yet we don't do it because we live in a culture where that's not the common approach. And so the more clear you can become on what's important to you and how are you going to actually make decisions in your life that support having the time and having the energy for the things that really matter to you. That's what makes the biggest difference. And there are different strategies depending on whether your challenge is more of a time management challenge or whether your challenge is more of an energy balancing challenge or a mix of both. Now, let's wrap up by highlighting the key points that I made in the workshop. One is that work-life balance and well-being go hand in hand. You need both in order to sustain performance. You need both work-life balance and well-being in order to be at your best at work and at life. Another key point is that modern work and modern life has made it harder to have work-life balance, not easier. And so we need to become conscious of this. It's not your fault if it's difficult. It's not your boss's fault if it's difficult. It's a reality that we all live in. And we all need to work together and support each other. Another key point I made is that the more work becomes a bigger part of your life, the more you put into that grocery cart with the wonky wheel, and the more important it becomes to fix the wonky wheel. And so what I mean by that is that work-life balance is not just about balancing time. It's about balancing the increased demand on your energy. It's about learning how to have more energy for all the different things that you want to do in life, so that you don't have to empty your grocery cart so much, so that you don't have to go down to just doing work and sleep, so that you can do all the things that you actually want to do, so that you have the energy for everything. That's so important. And when you choose the type of work-life balance you want, that's the last point, that's when you can be strategic. You can create change by creating conscious habits, both individual and collective workplace habits. All right, so that's all for now. Remember that I'm always looking for ways to support people and organizations that understand the importance of work-life balance and health. You are welcome to schedule a call with me anytime. Check out our wellness coaching program at www.neole.ca/upwell, or reach out to learn more about how we might help your organization improve its workplace culture. That's all for now. Enjoy the rest of your day.